Welcome to the Can Things Get Better podcast with Sarah Hamell.
Hey y'all, my name is Sarah and welcome to Can Life Get Any Better podcast. I want to start off with just kind of introducing myself and talking about what this podcast is going to be about. So I am a mom of 3 kids. I also am a boutique owner of a Western clothing store, and I'm a mental health clinician. I have been working in the mental health field for since 2009. So what is that, like 14 years or something? Since about 2010, 2011, I came upon this idea about how you have the power to change who you are, change yourself, improve yourself. I guess the idea of being an adult gave me that realization that who you are is all in your power, which makes sense because as kids, you don't have as much power as you do to change who you are as you do as when you're an adult. So ever since then, I have been working on self-improvement. I think my first book that I read on self-improvement that I can remember was either Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis or A. Brown about the power of vulnerability. So both of which I think we probably will review in this podcast. So anyways, what this podcast is going to look like. So like I said, it's a self-improvement book club. So very similar to other book clubs that you may have been a part of. We're going to get together once a week. Hopefully, assuming that schedule allows for it, I'm going to do a podcast once a week, and we're going to review a chapter every week. I'm going to be walking through these chapters. So we're going to walk through different details about the chapter and key points. And then I'm also probably going to be bringing up I'm definitely going to be bringing up different things that various self-improvement people have talked about that are similar or different, compare and contrast these things, how they work together, because I think that is the power of really digging in, is realizing that not only are you going to get this from one book, but you're also going to get it from another. And sometimes it's just how that person says it or how that person applies it that's really going to hit home for you. So we're going to hopefully, at the end of each chapter, it's going to depend on the book, but my goal is going to be at the end of each chapter for us to have some way that we can apply this knowledge that we've learned, because without application, self-improvement isn't helpful. Reading self-improvement books, just like slamming yourself with all this knowledge, is not helpful if you're not applying it. So the goal will be to end each session with some kind of activity that you're going to do, so that way you can see improvement in your life from this. Right now, we are going through Atomic Habits by James Clear. That's what this book looks like. I have the hard copy. I personally listen to the majority, I listen to all of my self-improvement stuff in audio. I just learn better that way. But for the purpose of this podcast, I'm going to be having the paperback versions because I find that it's helpful to have places that I can write notes and read along with the author and kind of jot down my thoughts. So you're going to see me pulling up the book every once in a while. Try to remember to reference which page it is on, so that way y'all can follow along if you want to. If not, we will just go from what I'm reading. So first off, basically this chapter is kind of giving you an introduction of what the idea of atomic habits are, which is explaining the power of small habits. So I really like how James, the author, starts off with a story about a bicyclist team that implements a number of small habits to improve their speed, and this in the end makes it so that way they can win championships in their said field, right? So it really pushes his idea that small habits, small changes, incremental changes can have a major impact in your life. So, and after that, it kind of goes into the idea of compounding interest and how, if you aren't familiar with compounding interest, it would be a good idea to do a little bit of research, because if you're not familiar with that, you really should be, as far as trying to plan for retirement. But I'm not going to go off on that bunny trail. As far as small habits, though, we talk about in this chapter how it's a 1% gain has a substantial improvement over time. So if you make 1% gain every day, you're going to have a substantial improvement within 30 days. That's 30%, right? And even if it isn't 1%, it's still going to have an impact. So, and it was really interesting to me. One book that I actually finished reading recently was The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And his book it kind of comes from that same concept of small habits making substantial changes over time. So I really liked that. So moving into kind of the meat of the chapter, was really interesting to me was how he talks about, he almost, at least in my opinion, it kind of started off with the idea of minimizing taking a massive action versus taking small action. So the idea of massive action versus small action and why you need both. If you have been in the self-improvement field for a long time, you're going to be familiar with people such as Tony Robbins, Dave Ramsey. Both of those two men talk about how when you have decided to make a change in your life, you have to take massive action initially to make that change in your life. And this is because typically when you've decided to make a change in your life, you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's one of my favorite Dave Ramsey quotes. I follow a lot of different financials advisors. I'm not going to promote him, but that particular quote, being sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that doesn't have to be with your finances. It doesn't have to be with work. It can be with being sick and tired of being heavier than you want to be. It can be sick and tired of not feeling taken care of. It can be sick and tired of not getting enough time with your family. Whatever it is, often for people to make change and to really have a strong desire to want to change, they have to be sick and tired of that negative thing. So those two men really talk about taking massive action initially, so that way you are seeing an impact in your improvement right away and making that decision. So whatever that may be, say you are going to, say your goal is to lose weight. So maybe that massive action would be throwing away all the soda in your house or donating it to somebody or something like that. That could be a massive action that you decide to take. One of my favorite Tony Robbins stories that he talks about in massive action is when he was doing his smoking cessation coaching. He talked about how he had this one gentleman that was trying to quit smoking, and he kind of shocked him into realizing that he didn't want to smoke anymore. How did he do that? By making him smoke like a whole carton of cigarettes. Don't worry, from my understanding, he doesn't do this anymore. He doesn't even do smoking cessation coaching anymore. But he found, obviously, that there were better ways to get someone to not want to do something. But I'm sure you have seen examples of this in your life where taking massive action or having something major happen, maybe it's not even something that you chose to happen, but it's something that just happened. So like someone that smokes may be developing, like finding out they have lung cancer. That's something massive. So they have to make a massive decision of never buying cigarettes again. Or, like I said, throwing the soda away, whatever it may be. Massive action is helpful. So back to the atomic habits. Sorry, I kind of went off on a little tangent there, but kind of minimizes the massive action thing in this. And I'm not a huge fan of that. But I will say that you cannot take your massive action is not going to stick without atomic habits. It just will not. So, anyways, Tony Robbins has where he has what he calls MAP, M-A-P, and you want to be asking your questions. You're going to be mapping out what you want this change to look like, essentially. So you're going to ask yourself questions like, how much weight do I want to lose? By when do I want to have my emergency fund saved? For what purpose? Why? Establishing that why do you want to reach that goal? Why do I want to have an emergency fund? So that way I feel like if there is emergency, I can cover it. I don't have to go into crisis. You cannot visualize, verbalize, and write down why you are pursuing your goal. It is likely that you have not formed the connection to make it a reality. So that why, establishing the why is very important. And I'm pretty sure that I'm jumping ahead for us in the Atomic Habits book, because I think that he does go over that a little bit. But I just want to kind of bring that up, because if we're going to be starting to implement habits right away, we need to think about this. Why? Why do you want to implement that habit? Why do you want to get up early before your kids are awake? Why do you want to make sure you're doing your skin routine every night? Whatever it may be. So if you don't have your why, it's going to be really difficult to maintain consistency in your habits. So it's very, very important to get that why, because if you don't have it, if you don't know why you want an emergency fund, whenever you go to the store and you see that, ooh, look at that cute lip gloss or whatever it may be, you're not going to have if you don't have a strong enough why, you're probably going to use your emergency fund money for that lip gloss or that pair of shoes or that new tool that you want. So establishing that why is extremely important for your success in the habit building. Okay. So then I really like this quote from page 15. It says, too often we convince ourselves that massive success requires massive action. Whether it is losing weight, building a business, or writing a book, winning a championship, or achieving any other goal, we put pressure on ourselves to make some earth-shattering improvement that everyone will talk about. So I think that that's what's really important here in the idea of taking massive action. The massive action is not for anybody else. It's for you, first of all. And second of all, you can continue to make very big progress with 1% change every day as well. So if you take that massive action and then you continue to make progress at 1%. So say you start a savings account and you put in $100, maybe that's massive. Don't judge me whether that's a lot or a little for you, okay? It's an example. Then you have, after that, you're going to put 1% in every single day. So let's say you're only saving $30 a month after that. You're still going to go from $100 to $130 to $160 and so on every month. So that 1% difference is going to add to that massive action. Okay, but the massive action is going to help your psychological ability to continue to make improvements and show yourself that this decision is a big enough decision for you to take seriously. So 1% better each day for 1 year will end up being 37 times better than by the time that you were done. Okay, so yeah. Moving on to the next section with compound interest as far as habits go. So I really love the quote, habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. So like if we're going to stick with the savings account example, $100, and we decide to just keep it at home in an envelope where it's not developing any interest. We all have been told that it is not wise to do that if you obviously you need to have some money on hand that you can access right away. But if you're looking at long-term savings goals, it's better to have this thing we like to call compound interest. Why is that? Because your money is making money for you without you doing anything, right? The bank is paying you 1% interest on every dollar that you have in there. So it's building that money up without you doing anything. So habits are the compound interest of your self-improvement. What does that mean? It means that when you develop a habit and it becomes an actual habit, it doesn't take effort to do it anymore. It's very similar to the bank paying you money on your $100. Okay. And then again, it's going to continue to have that snowball effect and ripple into something more. That brings me back to the Slight Edge book. There was an example that he gave us in that book talking about how, as far as self-improvement goes, if you read 10 pages a day, every single day, for a year, you're going to end up reading about 10 books a year. 10 pages might take you, 10, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on how fast or slow a reader you are. But it's such a small amount of your time, and every day you're taking in those 10 minutes of reading, and by the end of the year, you have 10 books completed, okay? What does that mean? So 10 books doesn't sound like a lot, right? But if you consider the fact that, kind of on a side note, like Tony Robbins talks about when he was young, each book that you're taking in, as far as self-improvement goes, you're taking in that person's life work. So what does that mean? For example, James Clear. He spent, I don't even know how many years to develop this concept of the small habits. He had a blog. If you read the introduction, he had a blog about small habits and started coaching people on small habits, and then went into writing a book. Okay. So it's this man's life work up until this point, this book. Or at minimum, 10 years of knowledge and experience, right? You're taking this knowledge and experience and applying it to your life. Can you imagine what that looks like as far as 10 books a year? So you're taking 10 different people's life work and applying it to your life. I don't know about you, but for me, what a time saver. Like, you didn't have to go through all that and learn those lessons. They're teaching you. It's like a big brother coming up and trying to give you, this is the easier way. Why don't you do it this way? And that is the idea of self-improvement for me. You're learning from someone else, whether you take a little nugget or you learn so much. It's something that the knowledge you wouldn't have had otherwise unless you went through it. So we have to remember, though, that knowledge is not power. Knowledge with action is power. So it is not enough just to read the book. You have to apply it. So just keep that in mind as we're reading it, okay? So yeah, this gets us into the positive habits table. And if you have the hard copy, this is the page that I'm talking about. It's this table here. So we have on the left side is the positive compounding, and on the right side, it's the negative compounding. I'm not going to go through these categories. If you've read the book, you already know. One of the things that really stood out to me in this section was the negative thoughts compound. So this slight edge, or this habit building, or whatever you want to call it, it doesn't just have an effect on you if you're making good decisions. It also has an effect on you if you're making not so good decisions. So each day your curve, like they talk about in the slight edge, each day your curve of these decisions, you're going to have a curve regardless, whether it's positive or negative, or whether it's the way that you want to go or not, it's going to curve. And that is based off of every little decision that you make every single day. So as a mental health clinician, I really liked the section about negative thoughts compounding. So this section, I'm just going to read to you really quick. It says, the more you think of yourself as worthless, stupid, or ugly, the more you condition yourself to interpret life that way. You get trapped in a thought loop. The same is true for how you think about others. Once you fall into the habit of seeing people as angry, unjust, or selfish, you see those kind of people everywhere. That can be very true. For me, as a mental health clinician and professional, what I really thought about when he wrote Negative Thoughts Compound is that not only do negative thoughts compound in the way that he talks about, but they also actually develop, your brain actually develops neural pathways. When you're having a negative thought, the neural pathways in your brain, they build up. They're like little bridges, okay? If you think about it like that, little bridges in your head. And if you let yourself continue to think negatively over and over and over, you're just building up those neural pathways slowly, okay? Just like that. Just think about little electrical things going across the little bridge, and every single time it gets stronger and stronger. So that's the power of negative thoughts. And as it says, negative thoughts compound. It makes it harder to not think negatively when you're so used to thinking negatively. So it takes an active choice to shut those negative thoughts off. That in itself is a very good habit for most people to develop. I myself have had to do that and focus on that, and it's still a battle sometimes. So in addition to that, I don't know if you guys know, but we'll go into that a little bit more, in that each thought that you have releases chemicals in your body. So when I was doing my research for this portion of the podcast, there was a really interesting article about meditation and how it improves depression. If you're a person or know somebody that struggles with depression, this is obviously not therapy. This isn't, if you are struggling with depression, it is important to seek professional help, but this article may be a good place to start in working on improving that for yourself. So moving on to the next section, what progress actually looks like. So in this section of the chapter, he talks about ice and how it only melts at a certain temperature, that it doesn't appear to make any progress when it is warming up to melting until it hits 32 degrees. It's 32 degrees that it starts melting, according to this. And I thought that that would be an interesting visual. You got an ice cube and paid attention. How long does it take to start noticing that it is melting? I've never really thought about that before. I personally, I feel like most people have weight loss as a goal. And I know that a lot of times they say, when you're working on weight loss, people aren't going to start noticing. You're probably not even going to start seeing it until you hit a certain point. Your first 10 pounds, no one's probably going to notice. It's not going to be until like 20 pounds that people might start noticing. But that doesn't mean that you give up, right? Because if you don't lose that 10 pounds, you're not going to lose the 20. So it brings us to the point of that's why people call it an overnight success. When you have been working so hard on yourself, on whatever goal it may be, say it's your business, and then, you're putting your nose to the grindstone and working on that every single day, people don't see that. They don't see that regular effort. And then all of a sudden, you're doing good and it's successful. That is not an overnight success. That was every day nose to the grindstone challenge, right? So one thing in this section that I thought about was there was another part, Rachel Hollis podcast, that she talks about her fitness goals and how her significant other had told her, well, don't you know that if you want to see progress in a certain area of your body, that you have to work on it for 6 months before you see any difference? That's not something I had ever heard before. And apparently that's not something that Rachel had ever heard before either. But 6 months of everyday grind before you're going to see the difference. So that's where the habits come in, right? Moving on to the next section, forgetting about goals. And I'm not a huge fan of that title. Most self-improvement people talk about goals and needing to have goals to reach your potential, to know what you're working towards. But I get kind of why he was saying forget about goals, because it's not just about the goal. It's about the implementing of the goal, or the implementing of the steps that it's going to take to get you to your goal, right? So this section of the chapter is really talking about systems and the importance of creating systems in your daily life to be successful. So what I have learned, and I honestly, forgive me because I don't remember. I'm sure that I've learned this as accumulation of reading various self-improvement books and TikToks and podcasts or whatever. But what I have learned to be the most successful in implementing a goal, like planning on a goal, is you have a major goal, one goal, and then you need to break that goal down into quarters. So let's say, for example, in a year, for my boutique, my goal, let's say, is to have 10,000 followers in a year. So if you divide that by 4, I'm not a math person. So we got, maybe we should, let's say we're doing 12,000 followers. Okay. So that would be, we need to have 3,000 followers every quarter, right? Then you break down how many quarters are in a year. There's 4, right? So then you break that down, and then slowly you figure out, okay, this is my goal overall. So now what do? You have to take massive action, okay, in figuring out how you're going to get more followers. So what does that massive action look like? It could be self-education if you don't know how to do it. It could be implementing a system, habit system, that is going to help you stay on track with sharing on a consistent basis. Let's say the habit for getting more followers is going to be you posting every day. So you have to get into the habit of posting on your social media account every single day. Whatever your goal is, you need to have this massive big picture. This is where I'm going. And then you break it down into smaller, more attainable goals. And then you learn what the daily habits you need to implement to reach those goals. So, creating systems so that way you can reach your ultimate goals. In the counseling world, or it's not even just the counseling world anymore, but I feel like, at least in my experience, it's been primarily in the counseling world, we call these SMART goals. So we set up SMART goals and achievable. So we have an action plan, we have a set number, we have how long it's going to take me to do it, when, what I'm going to do to be able to accomplish it, and what is going to happen if I don't accomplish it. But we'll get to that next. Really, the big benefit of breaking down your goals into quarterly goals, I think, is it provides an opportunity for self-reflection. So if you are truly trying to reach your goals every single day and you're not reaching them, like by the end of the quarter, you've developed your habits, you're doing your habits every single day, and you still are not reaching your quarterly goals, it may be time to do a little bit of self-reflecting on what habits you're forming, because maybe it's not the right one to achieve your goal. If my goal is to lose 30 pounds and the habit that I have is start eating a donut every single morning so that way I can lose 30 pounds, obviously we all know that probably isn't going to work, right? But if I keep pursuing that habit and I still keep questioning, why am I not losing my weight? Why did I not meet my quarterly goal? Then you're going to reach the end of the year disappointed because every single day you ate that donut, but you've gained weight. So it's really important to take that time and self-reflect. Are these daily habits actually getting you to your goal? And I think something that we need to think about as far as that goes is knowing when good enough is good enough. So I bring that up because I had this conversation with my daughter once about this idea of trying your best. I personally, my kids like to say, oh, but I tried my best. I tried my best. And sometimes your best is, it's great. It's good that you tried your best. You did the very best that you could. That's really important, right? And we want to teach our kids that you try your best. However, sometimes your best isn't working. I like to say sometimes your best isn't good enough because it isn't. If I am getting an F in math and I am still trying my best, like, that's okay. That's great. That doesn't reflect on you and make you a bad person. You tried your best. That is good. However, an F is not good enough and it's not going to get you to pass your class. So what do? Well, if that was you, you're getting an F, right? Maybe you're going to get a tutor. Maybe you're going to study more. Maybe you're going to apply some outside knowledge that you didn't have before. So going back to our habits and reaching our goals, if you are truly trying your best and you're not reaching your goals, you need to go back and self-reflect. Maybe you need some new knowledge. Why is this not working? And then go from there and try again. One of my favorite quotes from Tony Robbins, and I believe it was in Unleash the Power Within, is when you are failing at something, you're trying, but it's not working, you try again, and then you try again, and then you try again until you find something that works. You do something different. You don't do the same thing over and over again and think it's going to get you the same result. You do something different. So, applying those daily habits every single day, but remember that you still need to reflect on a regular basis to make sure that these daily habits are getting you to where you need to be or where you want to be. And sometimes maybe your ultimate goal changes, and that's okay too, but having that like flexibility in there, knowing that if your ultimate goal didn't change and you're not getting where you want to be, don't let that you're not getting where you want to be make your goal change. And I think that's a different topic for a different time, but just let's leave that nugget there and move on. Another aspect of this is that if you're having a hard time being consistent with your habits, again, reflecting. So at your quarterly time or whenever you decide to have that reflection time for yourself, if you have found that your habits don't seem to be making any progress, you want to reflect, but you also want to reflect if you are seeing that you're struggling with doing your habits every day. That's when you maybe need to reflect on your why again, because maybe your why is not strong, probably isn't strong, and that's why you don't have the motivation to do it every day. But I have a feeling that further in this book, we're going to have some more insight into that aspect. So we're not going to go there. But remember, we need to focus on the macro and the micro, big goal and daily habits. Okay. So moving into this though, the goal of this book is habits. So I'm going to flip to this last section here, which is on page 24, which starts off with saying a handful of problems arise when you spend too much time thinking about your goals and not enough time designing your systems. So that's very true. You don't want to be just sitting there thinking about your goal. Like if you're just thinking about how you want to lose weight, but you never take any steps to do it, it's never going to happen, right? So, problem number one, winners and losers have the same goal. I really like that because that's so, so true, right? Everybody has goals. Everybody has like the goal of being financially free, right? Everybody has that goal. But it's the people that take the actions every single day that are going to actually reach that goal, right? So we concentrate on the people who end up winning, the survivors, and mistakenly assume that ambitious goals lead to their success, while overlooking all the people who had the same objective but didn't succeed. Okay, so does that make sense? I think about how many people will start off their New Year's resolution with I want to lose weight. At the beginning of the year, you go into the gym on, the first of the year, and everybody and their dog is at the gym. And no joke, by what is it, February now, go into the gym and it's dead. That's not even a whole month. Okay. So it's only when you implement systems continuously making small improvements that you reach a different outcome every single day. Or if it's something that you need to do every day, but very consistent. You have to do it consistently. So don't focus so much on the goal that you forget to do your daily work, your consistent work. Okay. Problem number 2 with focusing on goals. Achieving a goal is only a momentary change. So this is really interesting because, and it's something that on the Rachel Hollis podcast, I believe it was, and there's a couple of other self-improvement areas that I have seen this concept talked about. So when you finally reach a goal, let's say you actually do it, you get that $1,000 in your emergency fund. But let's say it didn't take you very much. Maybe it didn't take very much to do that. You had $1,000 and you just decided, oh, this is going to be in my emergency fund. You get your tax refund, whatever. For whatever reason, you have $1,000 lying around and you just put it in your emergency fund. You didn't have to develop any saving habits or anything like that, right? So not only did you not have to develop any good spending habits, but also you reached the goal, but now it's like, now what? Now what are you going to do? So a lot of times the high of pursuing something and striving after a goal, the joy is found in the pursuit of the goal. It's not found in reaching the goal. Reaching the goal only lasts temporarily. That high of reaching the goal only lasts temporarily. It'll last for a day or so. Several people will talk about how, they finally reach their goal weight, or they finally get that book published, or whatever it may be. That high is going to last for like a day, 2 days, I don't know who, maybe see an example of that in my life would be, getting a master's degree. You work and you work and you work and you work. You've been going to school for who knows how long. You finally got that master's degree, that diploma that you worked so hard for. And I don't know about you, anyone that's graduated from anything, and it's like, I did all that for a piece of paper? Really? But we know that that's not all it is. But it's the habits, it's the skills that you learned along the way in that journey of getting that piece of paper that made it worth it. And being able to apply those skills throughout your life after that makes it worth it. It's not the diploma. It's not getting the book published. It's not reaching that 30 pounds of weight loss. It's the daily habits that make you successful and be able to keep pursuing and keep growing. Because you better believe, I sure hope that after you reach your goal, you set another goal. because you're never going to be growing. That's how you keep growing, how you keep living, how you keep improving your life, is reaching a goal and then setting another one. So in achieving the goal, it only is in a momentary change, right? So that's where the habits come into place. If you create good habits, then you can keep improving. You can keep growing. All right. Is goals restrict your happiness? So that's really interesting to me. It's more like the idea of, I'm not going to be happy until I lose that 30 pounds. I'm not going to be happy until I have a book published. I'm not going to be happy until I am debt free. That goal, if this is your mindset of, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to be happy until this goal is reached, it takes away your joy in your life. That's something that I learned in myself, is that when I first started on the Dave Ramsey journey of the DIT Snowball, and if you're familiar with that program at all, you will know what I'm talking about. But I learned pretty quickly that while it is really exciting to initially take that massive action and pay off debt or cut up your credit cards, whatever you do, it is not sustainable to maintain that, especially with finances, because there's only so much you can do, right? You can, of course, you can add a side hustle, make extra money, ask for a raise, do all of those things that they tell you to do. However, it is still a marathon. It is not a sprint. Depending on how much debt you have, depending on how much money you have already saved, it can be a long journey. And so needing to find joy in the little things, the little steps, the habits of your daily life, and how those habits are going to bring you to your goal closer and closer every day. That's where the joy needs to come from. Okay. And I'm sure we will talk about that again in another book, another time, because that brings me into, the idea of mindfulness and presence and enjoying the now and not being so focused on the future. But you still need to have those future goals to be able to reach where you're going, but focusing on the now also. So finding joy in the daily habits will increase your overall happiness, and also the habit you build will keep you going to your next goal, is the note that I wrote here in my margins. So problem 4, goals are at odds with long-term progress. That's interesting. That's a very bold statement as I read that now. But if you think about it, it can be true. So long-term progress, what are we talking about? So he uses the term yo-yo effect. So when I think of the yo-yo effect, I mostly think about weight loss. So you lose weight, you gain weight, you lose weight, you gain weight. I can't remember where it was. I heard someone said, I've lost 100 pounds. And they're like, oh yeah, good job. That's awesome. How much more do you have left to lose? And it's like, oh yeah, I've lost 100 pounds. That's because I lost the same 10 pounds, gained it back. So I lost 10 pounds, gained it back, lost 10 pounds, gained it back. But they've lost 100 pounds, right? So goals can keep you at odds with your long-term progress. And so you don't want to let that get in your way. That, once again, is why you focus on the daily habits, keeping that long-term goal in mind, but not having that be your primary focus. Your primary focus is developing those daily habits on how you get to that goal. Okay. And that's the end of the chapter. We're to the chapter summary. So remember that atomic habits are the building blocks of making remarkable results. I think this week we really did come across some good actionable steps in this conversation. The first thing that I think that we need to do is ask yourself this question and write it down if you have something to write with. If you don't have anything to write with, I'll put it in the show notes, okay? But where in your life, good or bad, have you seen the power of compounding habits? So good or bad, where have you seen the power of compounding habits? Because we all have seen them. Okay. And I do want, if you can, I want you to write this down, because this really is going to make it cement more in your brain. You are going to learn it better if you actually write it down. Okay. So pick out a couple things. If you can think of just one, that's okay. If you can think of a couple, then that's great. Second, I want you to write down a goal that you have, a long-term goal. And like we talked about, I want you to break down that goal into quarterly goals, and then really consider, what are those daily habits that you can start working on today to start reaching your goals. Okay? So that's the challenge this week. I am so glad that you guys decided to join me today. And I really look forward to keeping this up with you. Please check out the comments below, or comment below if you want to talk more, have an open discussion about this. Share with your friends if you think that this episode would be helpful for someone that you know. Please share. If you like and comment, review, that's going to help us reach more people and be able to have a bigger impact. I really want to be a service to y'all with this, and I hope that you got something out of it. You have a blessed day. Bye-bye.